She sent the message to the wrong number, but that one mistake would change everything. Emma Baker, struggling to keep her head above water, desperately needed $40 to buy baby formula for her daughter, Lily. With only $2 in her account, she typed the words, hoping for help. Little did she know her plea would land in the hands of Alexander Reed, a wealthy CEO with a past he couldn't escape. Want to know what happened next? Hit that subscribe button and stick around for the unexpected. Twist. Emma Baker's fingers hovered over her phone, the screen dimly lighting her face in the dark room. She stared at the text she had just typed, the words staring back at her like a harsh reminder of how far she had fallen. James, I hate to ask again, but I need $40 for Lily's formula. I get paid Friday. I swear I'll pay you back. Her hand trembled as she hit send, her stomach twisting in knots. She hated asking for help, especially now when it felt like she was constantly failing. It wasn't the first time she had sent a text like this. It wasn't the first time she had begged for money to feed her baby, but this time something felt different. The baby monitor crackled from across the room, the soft, rhythmic sound of Lily's breathing the only comfort she had. 6 months old. She should have been able to give her daughter everything. Instead, all she could offer was watered-down formula, a thin attempt to keep Lily from crying in hunger. Emma sank into the threadbare couch, her back aching from exhaustion, her mind racing with the weight of the bills piling up on the kitchen counter. Her phone buzzed. Her heart skipped. Was it James? Was it the help she needed? She unlocked the phone and stared at the screen. The name on the text read, Alexander Reed. She blinked. That wasn't James. She must have made a mistake. With a groan, Emma quickly typed a response, the embarrassment burning through her cheeks. I'm so sorry. I must have the wrong number. Please ignore that message. She tossed the phone aside, but her fingers lingered in the air, still vibrating with tension. Mortification hit her like a wave. Not only was she asking for help, but now she had sent it to a stranger. Another failure. She could hear the nagging voice in her head. You shouldn't have sent that. You shouldn't have asked for help again. But then, her phone buzzed again. She picked it up reluctantly, wondering if she should just ignore it. The message read, I think you have the wrong number. I'm not James. Her stomach flipped. She wanted to curl up into a ball and hide. But the message didn't end there. Is your baby going to be okay? Emma stared at the screen, confused, then suspicious. Who is this guy? Her first instinct was to ignore him, but the raw sincerity in his words made her pause. What kind of person reaches out to a stranger like this? It felt invasive, yet somehow kind? Why would someone care? She bit her lip and hesitated, the exhaustion clouding her judgment. Desperation nudged her fingers to type. We'll manage. Sorry to bother you. Before she could set the phone down, the screen blinked again. I could help. No strings attached. Emma snorted out loud, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. No strings, that's what they always said. The few times she had accepted help in the past, there had always been a price. Thanks, but I don't take money from strangers, she typed back, her hands trembling as she pressed the keys. It felt too dangerous, too risky. A moment passed. Then the phone buzzed again. She stared at the message that popped up. Smart policy. I get it. But I'm not a stranger, I'm Alex. She stared at the words. I'm Alex. The simplicity of it made her pause. Something in the way he signed off, so casually, so human, made her hesitate. She wasn't ready to open up to this. Stranger, but why not? What's the harm in responding? What formula does your baby need? Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the message. This wasn't a normal conversation. This wasn't a normal person. Emma felt her defenses crumble. She was so tired, so tired. Not just physically, but emotionally. Everything felt like a mountain she could never climb. She thought about Lily, her daughter, her world. She deserved more than this constant struggle. She had worked so hard to get by, to keep her family together, but it always felt like the ground was slipping out from under her. She closed her eyes, the weight of it all pressing down on her chest. She couldn't afford the formula. She couldn't even afford to buy a full bottle for her daughter. The thought of her baby crying for more, it was too much to bear. "What's your Venmo?" The next message appeared. Without thinking, Emma typed her username. She had nothing else to lose. If this person was going to help her, she might as well accept it, even if it felt like a bad decision. Seconds later, a notification popped up. She gasped, the words on the screen making her heart race. $400. This is too much, she typed back frantically. I can't accept this. The message that followed made her breath catch in her throat. Consider it an advance for the next few months. One less thing for you to worry about. She stared at the screen, her eyes blurry with unshed tears. The lump in her throat grew, thick and painful. She couldn't breathe. She hadn't cried when she lost her job. She hadn't cried when her landlord slipped that eviction notice under the door. She hadn't even cried when she had to water down the last bottle of formula. But now, the floodgates were opening. Thank you, she typed, the words feeling so small compared to the overwhelming gratitude flooding her heart. The message from Alexander Reed was simple. You're welcome, Emma. Take care of Lily. She set the phone down slowly, her hands still trembling. Tears fell quietly down her face. She hadn't asked for this kindness. She didn't deserve it. But somehow, here it was. A stranger's compassion. It wasn't until much later, as she headed to the store, that she realized something that made her blood run cold. She had never mentioned her daughter's name, and yet, somehow, he knew. The next morning, as Emma sat in the small kitchen, carefully preparing a bottle for Lily, the weight of the previous night still hung heavy on her shoulders. She hadn't expected the kindness. She hadn't expected someone to reach out so freely, so openly, without a hidden agenda. And yet there it was, a stranger's generosity that defied all logic, and in some strange way it comforted her. But as she turned to grab the formula from the cabinet, the doorbell rang. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone. She hurriedly wiped her hands on her apron before walking to the door, her mind racing. Was it someone from the landlord's office again? Or perhaps her former boss calling about the paperwork for unemployment? She opened the door cautiously, and standing there in a black uniform and serious expression was Officer Malone. "Miss Baker?" the officer asked, his tone formal but not unfriendly. Emma's chest tightened. "Yes, that's me. Is something wrong?" "I'm Officer Malone with the local police department. May I come in for a moment? I have a few questions," he said, his eyes scanning the modest apartment behind her. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her pulse quickening. What could this be about? Had she done something wrong? "Of course, please come in," she replied, stepping aside to let him in. She led him to the living room, where Lily was sleeping soundly in her carrier. The officer's gaze softened for a moment as he looked at the baby before he sat down on the worn armchair. "Miss Baker, I'm here about a case we're currently investigating. It's related to some suspicious activity we've been tracking. Financial irregularities, specifically in the technology sector. We have reason to believe your name might be connected to something we're looking into." Emma's blood turned cold. She didn't know what he was talking about. Was this a mistake? Her mind was racing. Financial irregularities? The only thing Emma knew about finances lately was how to stretch the last few dollars to make it until the next payday. She had nothing to do with any sort of financial crimes. Suspicious activity. "I'm not sure what you mean," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. She felt the lump in her throat as she fought to stay calm. The officer studied her carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly as he spoke. "We've been monitoring a series of discrepancies, and your name came up in connection to some financial records. Can you tell me about a man named Alexander Reed?" Her breath caught in her throat. Alexander Reed. The name felt like a sharp sting, bringing the memory of the $400 back into the forefront of her mind. She hadn't told anyone about him, not even James. How could they know about him? Emma's voice faltered. I don't know what you're talking about. She stammered. Alexander Reed is the CEO of a company I've been talking to. He helped me out when I was in a tough spot. Her stomach churned as she spoke, unsure whether she was telling the truth or not. She couldn't fathom what the officer was implying. Officer Malone studied her, his expression unreadable. "Do you trust this man, Miss Baker?" he asked, his voice soft but probing. Emma paused, the question hanging in the air like a weight. Did she trust Alexander? It felt like a loaded question, one she hadn't fully answered herself. In the short time she had been in contact with him, Alexander had shown a kindness that felt almost too good to be true. But there was always something about the situation that nagged at her, a feeling that things were unfolding too perfectly, too conveniently. I think so, she said, hesitating. But I don't know why he would be involved in anything illegal. He helped me, and I needed it. Her eyes darted to Lily, who was still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the tension in the room. He's just trying to help. Officer Malone nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving her face. It's important that you understand the situation clearly. We're not accusing anyone of anything yet, but there are connections between Mr. Reed and some high-level financial misconduct. You need to be careful, Miss Baker. Sometimes people get caught up in situations they don't fully understand. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Especially when they're desperate. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. Desperation. She had been desperate enough to accept help from a stranger, desperate enough to put her faith in someone who seemed too good to be true. Was she being manipulated? Or had Alexander genuinely wanted to help her without any strings attached? I don't know what to think anymore, Emma whispered, her voice trembling. All I know is that he helped me when no one else would. I was going to lose everything. My job, my apartment, my dignity. She paused, her heart breaking as she thought about Lily, about how close she had come to not being able to feed her. What am I supposed to do now? The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he rose from his seat and walked over to the window, looking out at the street below. You need to keep your distance from Reed, Miss Baker. He may be involved in something much bigger than you realize. Emma's mind raced. She didn't know who to trust anymore. All she had was Lily, and she had to protect her no matter what. Her eyes met the officer's, a quiet resolve forming in her chest. I'll think about what you've said, she said softly. But I'm not going to let anyone hurt my daughter, not again. Officer Malone nodded, his gaze softening. I hope you make the right choice, Miss Baker. Just remember, there's always more than one side to every story. As he left the apartment, Emma stood frozen by the door. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. She looked at her baby, who stirred in her carrier, and the doubt that had been simmering in the back of her mind boiled over. Was Alexander really trying to help? Or was this all part of a bigger game, one that she had no control over? The truth was becoming harder to grasp, and Emma knew she had to make a choice soon. But as the door clicked shut behind Officer Malone, one thing became clear. This was only the beginning. Emma sat down on the couch, her hands trembling as she cradled Lily in her arms. The soft rhythm of the baby's breathing was the only comfort in a world that suddenly felt far too dangerous. Officer Malone's words echoed in her head. Be careful. You don't know who you're dealing with. The weight of his warning pressed down on her chest like a vice, making it hard to breathe. Her mind raced, thoughts colliding with each other. She had trusted Alexander. He had been her lifeline in a moment of desperation. But now, with the officer's cryptic warning and the strange way everything was unfolding, Emma wasn't sure who to trust anymore. She glanced at her phone on the coffee table. Alexander hadn't contacted her since the money transfer. Her fingers hovered over the screen, the tension in the room so thick that it almost felt suffocating. Should she reach out to him? Was he just trying to help? Or was this all some elaborate setup? Her phone buzzed, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. She stared at the screen. It was a message from Alexander. "Hope you and Lily had a better night. I have a proposition for you." Her heart skipped a beat. A proposition? The word seemed innocent enough, but the knot in her stomach tightened. Why now? Why was he texting her again? It was too soon, too calculated. Was it just coincidence? Or had the officer been right? Was she being pulled into something much bigger than her, something she couldn't control? Despite the nagging doubt, Emma couldn't resist. She replied cautiously, "What kind of proposition?" The response came almost immediately. "Professional, not personal. I run a company called Meridian Technologies. We need someone with accounting skills for a short-term project. Your brother James mentioned you were looking for work." Emma's heart raced and she felt a cold sweat break out on the back of her neck. James? Her brother? How did Alexander know about him? She hadn't told anyone about her job search, let alone her brother's involvement in any of this. It felt like too much of a coincidence, too convenient. The pieces weren't fitting together. But then something else caught her attention. Meridian Technologies. The name rang a bell, but Emma couldn't place it at first. She was too caught up in the storm of emotions, the swirling confusion about her brother's connection to this man, to think clearly. "How do you know my brother?" "How do you know I'm an accountant?" she typed, her fingers shaking. The response came swiftly, almost too quickly. "I was talking to James this morning and he mentioned you. He speaks very highly of your accounting skills. We genuinely need help with a project reconciling some accounts before a merger. It's a 3-month contract with the possibility of permanent placement. Would you be interested in interviewing?" Emma stared at the message, a flood of emotions crashing over her. A job. A real job. It felt too good to be true. Like the universe had finally decided to throw her a bone after months of struggle and heartache. But her skepticism held her back. How does he know so much? Why now? Her thoughts were interrupted by another message from Alexander. "We pay well. The job is legitimate. We offer flexible working hours and we even provide on-site childcare. I can have you come in tomorrow to meet the team and discuss the details." Her heart pounded in her chest. It was everything she needed. Stability, a steady income, and most importantly, a future for Lily. But the suspicion that had been growing inside her refused to let go. What if it was all a setup? What if this wasn't a job opportunity but a trap? She had trusted people before, only to have them let her down. "I need to think about it," she typed back, her mind a whirlwind of uncertainty. She couldn't make a rash decision, but just as she hit send, another message came through. "I understand. Take your time, but please be careful. If you decide to go forward, the interview will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll tell reception to expect you." Emma stared at the message, her mind reeling. Was she being naive? Or was this a chance she couldn't afford to miss? She couldn't deny the sense of relief she felt at the thought of finally being able to provide for her daughter. But deep down, she still felt a gnawing doubt. What was Alexander really after? The next morning, Emma dressed in the only blazer she owned, the Sai. When she had bought second-hand months ago when she still held on to the hope that things would get better. She adjusted Lily's carrier on her arm and took a deep breath before leaving the apartment. As she walked through the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything about today was wrong. She was about to step into a world she didn't fully understand. And for all she knew, it could be a world that would swallow her whole. The ride to the office was quiet. The city around her felt distant, as if she were moving through a dream. When she arrived at the building, she was greeted by a receptionist who immediately recognized her name. Emma's heart raced as she followed the woman through the sleek modern lobby of Meridian Technologies. Everything about the place screamed wealth and power, and it made her feel small, insignificant. But then she looked down at Lily, who was blissfully unaware of the tension in the air, and the protective instinct surged in her chest. The receptionist led her up to the top floor where she was met by a woman named Martha, who ushered her into a waiting area. The room had a panoramic view of the city, the skyscrapers looming below like silent giants. But all Emma could focus on was the unsettling feeling that something was off. She had expected a typical job interview, but this felt like something more, something personal, something that had the potential to change everything. Martha offered her a drink, but Emma declined, unable to shake the unease gnawing at her. It wasn't until the door opened that she finally saw him. Alexander Reed. He stepped into the room, his presence commanding and almost intimidating. But as he walked toward her, there was something in his eyes, a flicker of vulnerability, something that made Emma pause. She had expected him to be cold, distant, like most powerful people she had encountered in her life, but he wasn't. There was something different about him. "Thank you for coming in, Emma," Alexander said, his voice low but sincere. "I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us." She nodded, unsure of what to say. The weight of the moment was overwhelming, and she couldn't ignore the feeling that everything was riding on this. The job, the future, her daughter's future. "I'll get right to it," Alexander continued, his tone shifting slightly. "The project we need your help with is critical. There are discrepancies in our financial records that need to be resolved before a major merger. We believe your skills are exactly what we need to get this done." Emma's heart skipped a beat. The job was real. She wasn't being led into a trap. But then, just as the sense of relief started to settle in, Alexander added, "But this project, it's more than just numbers. There's something bigger at play here. I hope you're ready for what's coming." His words sent a chill down her spine. Emma didn't know what to think anymore. The tension in the room was palpable, and as she looked into Alexander's eyes, she realized that this was no ordinary job. Whatever it was, she was about to get involved in something far deeper than she could have imagined. And there was no turning back. The days following Emma's meeting with Alexander were a blur of conflicting emotions. She had accepted the job, though doubts still lingered in the back of her mind. The office was impressive, the work challenging, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she was contributing, like she had a purpose beyond just surviving. But as the weeks passed, the uneasy feeling she had about Alexander, about the way everything had fallen into place so perfectly, didn't fade. She worked tirelessly, digging through the financial discrepancies, uncovering patterns that pointed to something far more sinister than simple accounting errors. Alexander's subtle warnings about the bigger picture began to make sense. Slowly, Emma began to see that the discrepancies weren't just about numbers. They were part of a larger scheme: money laundering, corruption at the highest levels of the company, and Vincent Harmon, the CFO, was at the heart of it. One afternoon, after weeks of quietly gathering evidence, Emma finally presented her findings to Alexander. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving the screen as she laid out the intricate details. She explained how millions had been siphoned off through shell companies, how the financial records had been manipulated to cover up the theft. It was all there, undeniable. "Are you sure about this?" Alexander asked, his voice low. Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. She had found the proof. Alexander took a deep breath, then turned to her. "This is it. This is the evidence we need to bring everything to light." He paused, his face hardening. "But be careful. Vincent won't go down easily. He's powerful, and now, with your discovery, you're in danger." The weight of his words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She had thought about the risks, of course, but to hear it from him, someone who had been in this world for so long, made everything feel far more real. She wasn't just dealing with office politics or corporate mistakes anymore. She was caught in something much bigger, something dangerous, but there was no turning back. Emma had a choice. She could walk away and protect her daughter, living in the shadows forever, or she could face the truth head-on, no matter the cost. The answer was simple. She had already risked everything to give Lily a better life. This was no different. The following days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and tense conversations with law enforcement. With the evidence Emma had provided, the FBI moved swiftly. The investigation turned into an all-out war between Alexander's team and Vincent's, with Emma caught in the middle. She had to be careful, she knew. Every word she spoke, every move she made could tip the scales in one direction or the other. Then one morning everything came to a head. Vincent made his move. The board meeting was scheduled, and Emma had been asked to attend as part of the team to present her findings. But things didn't go as planned. As soon as Vincent stood up to speak, Emma could see it in his eyes. He was ready to make his final play. He accused Alexander of orchestrating the entire scheme. He painted Emma as an accomplice, a pawn in a game she didn't fully understand. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. But Emma wasn't afraid. She had the truth on her side. Without hesitation, she stood up and walked to the front of the room, her voice steady as she began to speak. "I'm not his accomplice," Emma said, her words cutting through the thick atmosphere. "But I've uncovered something that you all need to know." She proceeded to present the evidence, methodically breaking down the financial discrepancies, explaining the web of deceit that Vincent had spun. She showed them the shell companies, the money trails, the manipulated records. It was irrefutable. The board members were stunned into silence, their faces a mix of disbelief and shock. Vincent's smug expression faltered, and for the first time, Emma saw the cracks in his facade. Then, as the FBI agents entered the room, Vincent's face twisted in fury. But it was too late. The truth had already been laid bare. In the aftermath, everything changed. Vincent was arrested and the company underwent a massive overhaul. Alexander, though shaken by the betrayal, remained steadfast. He thanked Emma for her bravery and her dedication. She had not only saved the company but had also protected the future of its employees. As for Emma, her life took a turn she could never have imagined. She was promoted to head of internal audit, a role she had never dreamed of in her wildest fantasies. But it wasn't the promotion that mattered most. It was the fact that she had earned respect, not just from her colleagues, but from herself. She had stood up to the storm, to the fears and doubts, and had come out stronger on the other side. She moved into a new apartment, one with a little more space, a little more security. And Lily, who was now walking and talking, had a future, filled with possibilities. Emma smiled as she watched her daughter play, her heart swelling with pride. And of course, there was Alexander. Their relationship had grown from a strange, unexpected beginning into something genuine, something real. They had both been through so much, but together, they had found a way to navigate the chaos. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was theirs. As Emma stood by the window, watching the city lights twinkle below, she thought about everything that had brought her here. The mistakes, the risks, the kindness of a stranger who had turned out to be much more than she ever expected. Life, she had learned, didn't always give you what you wanted, but it gave you what you needed. And sometimes the mistakes that felt like the end were just the beginning of something even better. She looked down at Lily, who was now asleep in her crib, and whispered softly, "We made it, sweetheart. We made it." The lesson was clear. Sometimes the darkest moments bring the brightest changes, and no matter how uncertain the path, it was always worth it to take that first step, even when it seemed like the world was against you.